Thank you again. For those who are connecting now, welcome to the second session of the After Congress of Biología de Plantas 2021. I'm Isabel Mendoza, the Global Plant Council's Communications Officer, and I will be moderating the session as well. Next speaker is Marta Terepek. I hope I said it right. Director of the 4TU Research Data. Sadly, Connie Clare, who is the Community Engagement Officer for 4TU Research Data, wasn't able to join us. This organization is an international data repository for science, engineering, and design established in 2018. Its services include training and resources along with curation, long-term access, and preservation of actual data sets, and available to anyone around the world. Marta and her colleagues will explain today the FAIR data principles. Thank you for agreeing to this webinar on so short notice. And now the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Isabel, and thanks so much to all of you for attending today's presentation. I'm sorry I'm not Connie, but I hope, and I'm not a community engagement manager, but hopefully all together we can try to make today's session as engaging as possible. I will now try to share my screen, so hopefully you can see my slides. Are you able to see my slides now?
Yes, it works.
Yes, super. So thanks again for the invitation. I just wanted to say that the slides of today are all available publicly, so you'll be able to see the presentation and all the links. Today we wanted to tell you a little bit about 4TU research data, what it is, and also why would you want to publish FAIR data together with some case studies. Before we start, I would like to share with you a couple of housekeeping notes. So first of all, we would really appreciate if you could mute your microphone if you're not speaking. As you already know, the session is recorded, so you are welcome to put your camera on, but of course, feel free to switch it off if you feel more comfortable having it off. If you have any questions of us, there will be time at the very end of the presentations that we will be able to discuss your questions. So please use the Q&A button that you can see in your operational buttons in Zoom to ask your questions. And because today we will have 3 speakers, that would be great if you could also include the name of the presenter that you have the question to. And of course, if you experience any technical difficulties, please write your question in the chat. Then that's the agenda for today. We would like to first welcome and introduce ourselves, but also get to know you a little bit more. Then I will give a presentation on behalf of Connie Clare about how 4TU research data can help you make your data fair and what does it mean to make data fair. And then we will have actual use cases from researchers within your domain on what it means to make fair data in specific disciplines. So we'll hear from Beatrice and Manya. And of course, time for questions. So without any further ado, I would like to start with introductions. You are supposed to hear today from my wonderful colleague, Connie Clare, who is a very engaging community engagement manager, but she could not be here with us. So you have me instead. My name is Marta Terepek, and I'm the director of 4TU Research Data. And today with me are 3 other colleagues. So I would appreciate if you could perhaps introduce yourself. Beatrice?
Yes, good morning, everyone. My name is Beatriz. I'm working at Wageningen University as microbial ecologist and topics related with plant health and risk factors in circular agriculture.
Thank you. Manya?
Hello, everyone. My name is Manya Afonso. I'm a researcher at Wageningen University and Research in the groups of biometrics and agro-food robotics. And I work mainly in projects related to the application of computer vision and machine learning in agriculture.
Thanks so much, Manya. And you, Eri?
Good morning. My name is Eri van Heinsberger. I also work at Wageningen University and Research for the Plant Research Institute. And my job is coordinating data stewards. And in short, that means that I help researchers with their research data management. And one of the topics of that is publishing new research data.
Thank you so much for introducing yourselves. The next question is actually to you. We would appreciate if you could tell us a little bit about yourself. So who are you? And for that, I would like to invite you to use Mentimeter, www.menti.com, and use that code 352488. I will now change my display so you can see it also in the question and answer view. Are you able to see the Mentimeter slide now? So again, please go to www.menti.com, and if you could use the code 352488, you should be able to now see the same screen that I see. So the first question is, which research institution are you from? And I can already start seeing the responses. IVIA, I don't know that acronym. I'm very curious. Maybe one of the organizers know what's the acronym from.
Yes, I'm going to check very quickly because I knew it, but I don't know it by heart.
We have also.
So IVIA is the Institut Valencià d'Investigacions Agràries. It's the Valencian Institute for Agriculture Research.
Super, thank you so much. We have two people from University de Vigo. We have, again, Valencia. Laguna, I think that's also popular, that pop up like a little bit bigger. Unipolito Cartagena. So a couple of colleagues from CSIC, I can see. From IMIDA Murcian Institute as well. Super, thank you so much. It seems like we have really big diversity in terms of the institutions that you are all coming from. That's really great to see. And the second question that we have for you today, I don't know, my slides are not advancing somehow. Yeah, sorry. Now they advanced too fast. What is your professional role? We would really appreciate if you could tell us what's your level, like at which career you are performing your current research, or if you are a research supporter or something else. We have a PhD researcher, more PhD researchers, research supporters, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. Postdoctoral researcher, a professor. Another professor. Yes, we have also a bachelor's master's researcher. Somebody in other category, very intriguing. Who are the other? Always interesting to know. Some more professors, PhD researchers. More PhD researchers. Thank you so much. It's really nice to see that we have diversity across the entire spectrum. That's always good to have this diverse audience. Thank you so much. More professors joining us. And the next question that I have is also, what is your research discipline? So for example, plant pathology or other disciplines, of course, that you are doing your research on. Plant development. Plant physiology. Modeling, ecophysiology, fruit growth, irrigation. Plant physiology seems to be the most predominant today. Cell wall and breeding, weed control, woody species, very nice. Molecular plant biology, plant ecophysiology, a bit more of that, nice. Very nice, thank you so much. It's a really big diversity. I can also see genetics, secondary metallism, that I did not know about, allelopathy, stress plant, microbiology. Thank you so much. Let's move to the next question also. That's really relevant to today's talks. What type of data do you produce? For example, next generation sequencing data, maybe you collect observations of plants. What are these data that you are producing, collecting as part of your research? Plant phenotyping, images, gene expression, NGS indeed, genotyping, phenotyping, metabolomics, phenotyping again, gene expression, observation indeed. Parameters. Yes, indeed. Genomics, indeed, we already had photosynthesis. That's interesting. I would really want to know what kind of data they are. Models, indeed, modeling data. Thank you so much. One of the second last question I wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts, like first thoughts, if we were asked you about what do you think about publishing and sharing your research data? Any initial associations, reactions that you have about publishing and sharing your data? First words that come to mind, feelings, experiences, opinions. Maybe no thoughts. Helpful, important for the advancement of science, nice. Great, but worrying. Should be free for everyone. No problem for extra work, indeed. One more step, completely open. It's a very long process, useful. Would be okay if already published in a journal. Fundamental for the common advance in science. It's very interesting actually to see open science. People can clearly seem to identify the benefits of sharing data, but also understanding that it comes with extra effort, extra steps. So that's something that I would try to address in today's talk. And I think my colleagues would also talk about their experiences. And my final question before starting the presentation, just to know your experience, like I wanted to ask you a question if you have ever used a data repository to publish your data. One yes, straight away. Don't know is also a valid answer, by the way. Yes, we have, I don't know, also no. Couple of yeses, no's, a bit more no's. Don't knows. Don't knows. And another yes, that's perfect. That's really good to know. I think that gives us hopefully something that we'll be able to share with you. And by the end of today's presentation, you will know a little bit more about data repositories and what they can be useful for. So I will stop sharing the Mentimeter slides. Now we'll come back to that at the very end of the presentation. And now I would like to share with you a couple of slides. I hope you can see my slides well again about what is 40U research data, what are the FAIR data principles, and what are the benefits and some challenges with FAIR data. So first of all, what is 40U research data? As Isabel has already explained, we are an international data repository for science, engineering, and design. And what a data repository means, it's basically a place where a researcher can publish their data, the data becomes available, and the repository takes care of maintaining this data in the long term. 40U research data is available globally to every researcher, so anybody from any institutions can upload the data free of charge to 40U research data and also reuse the data sets which are already in there. Our mission is to, indeed, as I mentioned beforehand, to make the data accessible, to share them, but also to make sure that they are properly preserved and available in the long term. And because of that, we also are a certified repository. That means that we have this international recognition that we do it well and we do it reliably. So hopefully that's also important to know. As Isabel said, we have been founded in 2010 by 40U Federation. That's a union of 4 technical universities within the Netherlands. We were originally founded by Technical University of Delft, University of Eindhoven, and the University of Twente. And we are very pleased to say that Wageningen has joined 40U Research Data as our newest member. So welcome, Wageningen. And today the presentations that you will hear are also from our colleagues from Wageningen. So what do we mean again about tailored discipline-specific solutions? It's very important for us to specialize in the disciplines of science, engineering, and design, because then our services, our support that I will explain a little bit later can be more tailored to those particular disciplines. And we support quite a range of disciplines, anywhere from mathematics through environmental sciences, biology, agriculture, and veterinary sciences, also management of technology. So that can be quite diverse, but that's within that domain of science, engineering, and design. And then I promised I would try to share with you a little bit about what are these fair data principles that so many people are talking about. So how this all started, it started with a paper, like sometimes it is. Actually, colleagues from the Netherlands wrote a paper in a journal called Scientific Data, that's part of the Nature group. And they set out the scene for the fair guiding principles for scientific data management and stewardship. And the idea behind this, that if the data is fair, and I will explain in a second what it means, that would help us to maximize the added value of science through making the data available. And what was quite surprising at the time, this paper has been published in 2016, has been cited numerous times since then, but what is also quite interesting to see that funders across the globe, I would say, they are really asking researchers increasingly to make their data fair as part of the grant conditions. So that became really international, these FAIR principles. And what does it mean? I promised I will explain that. FAIR stands for F for findable. Machines, humans can find the data on the internet. Data has a persistent link associated with it. Data are accessible, so both humans and machines know how to access the data. For example, do I have to log in to use the data? Can I download the data from the internet, and so on? Datasets are interoperable. That means that you can combine these datasets with other datasets, with other software, other workflows to, in the end, be able to effectively reuse them. And for reuse, you also have to know the access conditions. For example, are there any restrictions on the data sets? Is there a license? What can I and what I cannot do with the data? And I will now tell you a little bit more how 40U research data supports these FAIR data principles. So that's how we put FAIR into practice in our data repository. So how we try to help it is, first of all, as I mentioned before, we provide a trusted, safe, and secure long-term preservation for research data. So the data are findable, they are accessible, they are interoperable and reusable for a longer time. They don't expire, like, for example, when your hard drive doesn't work anymore. We also try to help with this interoperability by integrating various tools and workflows that researchers have. So, for example, researchers who work with software, with code, they are very easily able to publish their software in a versioned manner through integrations with GitHub and GitLab. So we're trying to connect to researchers' workflows. Every dataset, every software that we publish gets a digital object identifier. Maybe that's something that you are familiar from the papers. Every paper has a DOI. Every dataset also has a DOI. And this is very important to be able to cite and increase the visibility of datasets, as I mentioned before. So DOIs really helps us to track data citation and increase its impact and visibility. For restricted data sets that, for example, are confidential due to privacy reasons or commercial concerns, or maybe you want to publish your data but the paper is not published yet and you want to put an embargo, that's also possible. We have this functionality of restricted access. We do provide dedicated support, dedicated people support who can help you with reviewing the metadata and the data, so to help you improve your metadata and the quality of your research data. And we also show usage statistics, and I will give you some examples of that in a second. That's our team as well, some pictures of the people involved. But what I wanted to tell you a little bit, reflect with you as well, and I'm very curious to see if you would find it also true for yourselves, like how does it work really from a researcher's perspective? And I think there were some comments already about this in the question, what do you think about data publishing? Very often researchers are faced with lots of challenges, lack of time, lack of incentive. Why would I do that? Sometimes it's perceived like administrative burden, yet another thing you have to do. Some people will say, oh, well, maybe my data is not valuable, so I shouldn't share that, or it's not worth it. Some people are afraid of scooping. What if I share my data and somebody else would reuse it or publish their own papers with that? Again, that fear, what if I release personal commercial data? Some people simply don't know how to do it. And in general, sometimes it leads to this perception of being overwhelmed, even thinking about this data sharing. So what we have to do is really to think about the benefits. So if you share your data, you make sure that data are safely and securely preserved for the long term. So you don't rely on USB sticks, hard drives, trying to move around them and making sure that they still work. You can easily share your data with the others for the purpose of transparency. There is evidence that if there is a paper and if there is data supporting the paper, this increases citation and visibility of that paper. Of course, there is less wasted time, resources, and careers if researchers can simply access the data instead of first starting a new project, redo the experiments of the others and regenerate the data. Of course, sharing the data, just thinking about this, somebody might look into this, improves reproducibility, the way we describe the data, and also as a result, reuse and collaboration opportunities because people can see your data. So more impact of your research. As I mentioned, compliance with policy requirements, more and more funders, but also journals will require researchers to publish their data. And there were increasing number of retractions of papers because data hasn't been made available. And finally, if you share your data in the repository and you give people a link, that means that you don't have to be bothered. Let's say in a traditional manner, sometimes researchers would put asterisks, I'm the contact person for this paper. If you have questions, ask me. That means that you have to respond to an email, and maybe you have to respond to this email 5 years after your paper is published. So sharing your data in a repository means this burden goes away. And again, you can see your statistics on how well your data has been reused. And for that, we really believe it's important to have seamless services and this personal touch. It's not only about the infrastructure, but also the people involved who can support you in that process to make it as easy for you as possible. And now I'd like to show you that I showed you a little small team of 40U research data, but actually you have much broader community of people who are working with us and are sharing the data with 40U research data, like the colleagues today who will be presenting to you about their experiences. And what do we do together and how? How do we support this process to make it as easy as possible for researchers? First of all, we do invest a lot in engagement and education. So we do a lot of working groups, focus groups, discuss the topics which are of importance to the community. We do organize training, workshops, and demonstrations. For example, sometimes researchers would come to us, we are really lost. Can you do a demo for us for your research group? Then we will be more than happy to come join you and do a demonstration how that process of uploading data works to make it as easy for you as possible. We try to reward and recognize data sharing. So for example, and I'll show you one example of stories about researchers and data being shared to showcase these big achievements. We try to celebrate any data initiatives. And again, I will show you some examples. And finally, we also try to incentivize data sharing. So actually we have some funding available for researchers who would like to share their data that only is for partner institutions, but researchers can apply for money to be able to, for example, make their data more reusable, add metadata, make them a little bit better described. So that's something available to them. And we will be starting a fellowship program to also provide some more incentives for people who want to work on fair data. And as I mentioned, examples, I think, speak much more than talking about something theoretically. I wanted to share with you a story of a researcher from Amsterdam, Nadia Bloemendaal, who won also the Dutch Data Prize last year. She had a paper in Nature and she has shared her data sets with 40U research data. This is her data set. The data set since autumn last year has been already downloaded more than 4,000 times and cited 5 times, which I think is quite a lot for data set, and also for the fact that it's only been happening in September. So that's really quite an impactful case. And what this data set is about tropical cyclone risk research. So she has been doing some modeling of tropical cyclones. They occur very rarely, so people really don't know exactly how to predict them better. But of course, when they happen, that's quite devastating for communities. So she has been sharing this modeling data with the others, and it turned out that it has been enormously valued, but valued not only by researchers who do research on climate, also from those communities affected by tropical cyclones, but also, for example, by people architects who design buildings, who wanted to know what and where they should improve, policymakers, and interestingly, insurance companies who also wanted to know where are the risks, where we should be more careful about this happening. So that's, I think, a beautiful case that sharing your data can really make your research much more impactful. And the final two examples I wanted to share with you, it's also that we help researchers to promote their data sets. So every week we pick up one data set that we want to highlight on Twitter, and that actually really matters. So I wanted to show you statistics of a data set from a PhD student, Luca Marotta, who published a data set with 40U research data. This is the number of downloads that you can see and number of views. And at the time of publication, there wasn't really many. But when we started tweeting about this data set, you can see the example there, people really started looking into this data set that got much more traction. And the same is another, like we also try to promote the data sets through the newsletters. Every month we pick up a couple of data sets, one data set from each partner institution to give them this extra push, you know, please, have you seen this data set? It's really interesting. And to show you the impact of this, again, the time of publication, one of these data sets, the last one, inventory of RDM policy. At the time of publication, there wasn't really much interest, but when we tweeted about the data set and then when the newsletter was published, again, there is much more interest and visibility. So hopefully that's good evidence to show you that we can help you to indeed get some more impact of your research. And finally, before I hand over to other speakers, if you want to learn more, you can, of course, upload your data set. You can join the community. It's open to everybody. You are more than welcome to be part of it. And you can, of course, subscribe to our newsletter. And with that, I would like to give the floor to Beatrice. Now we'll stop sharing.
Thank you. I will share my screen now. I hope screen 1, 2. And use this one. Can you share can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, I will see if this is working. Okay. Yes, thanks first of all, thank you very much to Connie and Marta for inviting me today to talk a bit about my research and my experience with FAIR data and the 40U database. And I would like to talk a bit about my experience, but also to share a bit about small part of science behind, in case anybody is curious about the work I've been doing in relation to this data set. And well, I already introduced myself. I work as a microbial ecologist in Wageningen University, almost now for 10 years. And I'm in the group called Biointeractions and Plant Health. The research I do currently is focused in the use of side streams and the impact they have in circular agriculture in relation to plant health, but also in relation to risks, like, for example, the transmission of antibiotic resistances or human pathogens. And the data set that I share in the 40U database is related to this publication, related to the chitin and keratin soil amendments and their effect on the suppression of a pathogen, Rhizoctonia zolani. And you can see in the screenshot here how it looks in the 40U webpage, and it's very easy to learn a bit about the content of the data set and to download. And it's quite straightforward. If you are curious, just go there. This is the DOI number. And as Marta said, it's very easy to access. And the data set is related to several types of side streams. They are grouped in types based on the nature of the side streams. So we have feathers, for example, pig hairs, vegetable waste, garden waste, oily seeds. We have also poop. And poop mixed with mushrooms. I made it very simple with the names because I thought that would get to the people better. And we tried them all. We tested them all against Rhizoctonia zolani disease in sugar beet plants. So that's what we did. We mix it with agricultural soil. We test them on biosafe in the greenhouse and see how Rhizoctonia solani disease was advancing in these plants. And also we analyze the fungal and bacterial community on those amendments. And also we measure all kinds of environmental variables. So we had a quite broad and huge data set to handle. And the questions that we had is what types of organic products stimulate this suppression? Can be this suppression ascribed to specific microbial groups? These microbial groups correlate with some specific soil properties. And what we found is mainly that in the end, the manure mixed with chitin, which is the poop and mushrooms, and the keratin-based amendments, which are the ones that come from the feathers, were the best. They were suppressing this disease in those plants. And we also saw that they were very rich in a type of bacteria called Oxalobacteriaceae and a type of fungi that are called Mortariella. And also they were very correlated, highly correlated to compounds related to selenium, zinc, and copper. How to interpret this? This is, if you are more curious about this, you can read the paper, of course. That was just an introduction for the data set for you. But the point today for me is to talk about why fair data, why I share my data. So first of all, when you work with this type of data, especially the omics data, you are working only with the type of the iceberg. So we use only part of it because we were interested in part of it, but other people might be interested in many other part of these data sets. So we thought it would be important to share it. They can get more out of this data. And then you can create science with impact in that way. You can take the most out of the data, as I just said. And also very important for me is to peer review your code because you work, I work with scripts analyzing these data sets. And of course you check, you have your colleagues checking, but I think it's always good to share it with the bigger community so they can also check it. And maybe there is something that was better to do it differently or they can take out better out of the script that you just made. And also you can get more collaborations because you, as Marta just said, more people can be interested and then download your data set and they think, oh, we saw something interesting on here that you didn't check out. And then you can start new collaborations. And I think that's very also important as a scientist. And you can get site studies based on these data sets and you can better exposure your research as Marta just explained. Yeah, so, but why 40U? Because you have several types of platforms. For myself is because they have a lot of workshops. I also went myself to one of these workshops where they explained me how I could upload this data set, what kind of guidelines I have to follow, because this is very difficult, this first step. You have to follow some guidelines, you need a format, and you have to work out this a bit. And with this workshop, everything was clear for me, and I knew what to do. In my case, it was supported by Wageningen University, but also is supported by other universities in the world. So it would be quite relatively easy for the other people. And also, if you sign up, you can get updates for new database data sets. For example, you may think, okay, if I go to a paper, sometimes they upload the data set themselves in the journal, but it's less centralized. And then you may miss a lot of other information that you didn't find out through journals, but then here you can find it, like related data sets for the information you are looking for. And it's quite user-friendly. That's something I'm also looking for because sometimes you find web pages that are really difficult to serve. And it's true at the beginning, it needs just a little bit of extra time, but once you've done the first one, it's worth it, and the next one will be easier. So I hope I convince you a little bit more about the benefits of using this kind of databases, and thank you for your attention. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Beatrice, for the very nice presentation. Much appreciated. For any of you who have questions to Beatrice, please add them into the Q&A box so that we can pick them up at the end of the presentation. Meantime, I would like to invite Manya if you would like to share your presentation and your case study with us.
Yeah. Okay. Do you see my slides? Yeah, present. Okay. Do you see my slides in full screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so good morning, everyone. I'm Manya Fons from Wageningen University and Research. So first of all, thanks to Connie and Marta for the invitation to share my experience in sharing my research data. So what I will present today is our experience with sharing our research data for a phenotyping project based on image processing. And that was specifically about one of our papers on deep learning for detection of tomato fruits. Which you can see in the leftmost image here. So the first question is, what was our motivation for sharing the data? So now the short answer is scientific reproducibility, so that other researchers in the field could reproduce our results. But the long answer is in line with what has already been presented by Marta and by Beatriz. So the FAIR principles, but more importantly for us, for in the field of AI and deep learning, is that these are a data-driven field. In that you require an initial data set to get started in your work. Which we know is the case with in many fields such as self-driving cars. And one of the important books on data science and statistical inference has this line: "We are drowning in data but starving for information." So this, I think, is a very relevant point to our motivation, because we may have a lot of data such as images, but how useful will they be, or what is the information that they contain? And this is why we think that in spite all the work and effort on our side to prepare this data, it's still important to share it. And of course, another important motive is to get more visibility, to get more citations. So to explain background about this particular research, so this is about our recent paper in Frontiers on Plant Science, which was accepted in October last year and published in November. So it is open access. Everybody is free to access it, the full text, and also the data set, which is available online on the 4TU server. So the background of this project is that the goal is to develop an autonomous tomato phenotyping robot, which can autonomously navigate through a greenhouse, uh, uh, collect images of the tomato plants that are growing there, and from our image processing and analysis, obtain some information on the different varieties which is relevant for the plant breeder. And this project was public-private partnership with Enzazaden, a Dutch plant breeder and seed company, and it was co-funded by the TKI Foundation. So we see in this image the imaging setup that was shown, that was used, and this was mounted on a robot from Metaset. and the imaging system contains 4 real sense cameras. And what is really our contribution in this work is that we presented results in a practical greenhouse system rather than in a laboratory, which is what most of the literature in this topic used. So here we see some of the examples from the data set and the ground truth that we prepared. So the real sense cameras collect the color images, which are called RGB, red, green, and blue, and the depth, that is how close or far they are from the camera. And the annotation effort in this work was that we had to manually, using an annotation tool, draw the outline around the tomato fruits, which we see here in image A. That's the raw image. And after marking the fruits, we obtain the ground truth, which is shown overlaid in images C and D. In C, we consider all fruits as belonging to one class, and in D, we have 2 classes for the ripe fruits and the unripe ones. And the challenge here, you can also see, is that the contrast and the color is quite different. There's a variation in the color for the fruits. So one really needs to be well acquainted with the setup used to be able to annotate the right fruits from the plant that we want to consider while ignoring the ones from the background. So finally, the data set that we were able to obtain through the manual annotation had 123 annotated images with a total of more than 1,600 fruits. With this breakdown, there were more green than or unripe fruits than the ripe ones. And yeah, we followed like roughly the 2/3, 1/3 split between the training and validation set for the results that we reported in this work. And the pipeline that we followed for this particular paper was that we used the training data to train the deep learning software Masca CNN, and then use that on the test set or on new images. And on top of that, we use some post-processing based on the depth to get rid of additional background fruits. So here we see one example of results that we obtained with deep learning. So compared to the leftmost one, which is classical segmentation, in which we look for circular objects as fruits, we see that the deep learning, that is the second and third columns, works much better in that it's able to not take false positives and also not miss some of the true positives. And we were able to obtain both precision and recall of above 90% using Masca CNN, so which is way more compared to the classical image segmentation. Yeah, and also when we consider the 2 ripeness classes separately, probably for the red, for the ripe fruits, the precision is not that good because of there being fewer samples for the ripe fruits than the unripe ones. So what did all this bring us? So The paper has been online since October of 2020, and the data set has been online since March of this year. So since then, from the 4TU data server, these are the number of views that we have obtained, 438 with 329 downloads. Then from the publisher, from Frontiers, the paper itself has had more than 5,500 views. So far, this has translated into few citations on Google Scholar. We have had 2 citations that have appeared, but we hope that the interest in the data set leads to more of them. From ResearchGate, we have already seen that the paper has been read almost 200 times. So yeah, I think the fact that we have made available our data set will help in improving the visibility. So to end, I would like to acknowledge the funding from TKI Foundation. And I would also like to mention that the Wageningen Data Competence Center team were very helpful in preparing the data set for uploading to the 4TU data server. So that was a big help to us in terms of saving effort on our side. So that is all.
Thank you so much, Manya, for your presentation as well. Much appreciated. Perhaps now if we can all come back together to the main room. So if you could stop. Yes, we can now, people can see us. And I was wondering if there are any questions to any of us, and also wanted to encourage others. If you can add your questions that you might have to Manya, to Patrice, or for myself, please add them in the Q&A. Maybe there are already some questions.
Marta, there was already one question in the chat. I'm not sure if you've seen it, but it's about what's the added value of uploading to 4TU versus publishing your data in a specialized data journal?
Thanks so much. That's a very good question. And I think Patrice has already started explaining a little bit about indeed some of those advantages in terms of impact, that indeed if you put your data set in a place which is specialized for data sets, other people might also come and discover your data sets when searching for uploading their data set, or indeed searching for something similar. So data set will be discoverable as data sets when it's, of course, in other specialized resources. Like you look for papers, you search for papers. If you search for data sets, more likely you will find them within the data set than just by referring to this one paper and one data set in the publication. But secondly, there is also some technical reasons and policy reasons for that. So journals like scientific data are in fact just journals. So that's a PDF of a journal and an HTML version that you have on the website. But journals, in fact, don't have any means of preserving data. You know, to make a paper, a PDF available in the long term, I don't want to diminish the effort, but it's relatively an easy task. If you have a data set, and they come in a multitude of formats and flavors, our dedicated team is also responsible for preserving them in the long term. But what it means that often colleagues will have to do file migration efforts. So for example, what if your file format becomes obsolete? Then our team will have to do this migration for you. And that's not something that a journal does with a PDF of a paper. And the same is, as I mentioned before, we do also integrity checks on data sets. So I mentioned beforehand the case when the file becomes corrupted. We have multiple copies of every data set. So if a file becomes corrupted somewhere, we automatically get alerted in the system, and we know that we have to restore the copy from the backup. So basically, preserving data sets is something completely different than preserving publications. And on the policy level, additional advantages of sharing your data separately than a paper is that paper sometimes is behind paywall. you know, who, like, I'm sure you have encountered journals where you have to pay in order to read a paper. That also means that you would also not be able to access the data set. So it's much better, you get much more visibility if you share your data set separately. People will be able to access your data set. All our data sets are accessed free of charge, so we don't charge anybody for getting access to them. They are free. And as Manya has also explained, you really increase your impact by having this additional visibility that researchers will find your data set, also for your paper. So in a way, you just increase your impact overall. I hope I have answered your question. Eri, we don't hear you.
Sorry, there's a question in the Q&A. I'm not sure if you can see it.
I don't, I'm afraid, sorry.
I can read it out loud. An important question is what is the standard for data sets? We developed an R package, a GC profile make R because it uses CAS numbers which are fair friendly compared to metabolic names. This is as important as sharing the data.
I agree with that completely. Indeed, the use of standards, I believe, is very important, indeed, as we mentioned, for interoperability. So there is an important driver to think about what would be useful for the community, what's useful for the long term. But I was wondering that maybe Beatriz or Manya, maybe you would like to comment a little bit on that from your experience, if of course you would like to add on that aspect, how you selected which kind of formats that you want to share your data in.
Yes, I can explain. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I can tell about our specific area in deep learning, especially for computer vision. There are standard there are standard formats or protocols from the existing software implementations. For example, the Microsoft COCO format, which are used like as the standard formats for the developers of software in the field. So we stuck to that and we try to maintain this format. So I guess it would depend on the specific topic and area.
Mm-hmm. I think so too. Patrice, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I totally agree with what has been said in the Q&A box, and we have to look for the most standardized way of presenting the data. That's what I did. In my case was quite straightforward, but looking into, yeah, the standardized names, the guidelines that every researcher working on this specific data are using to make it clear. And if you save it yourself in your computer in a way that is easier for you at that moment, keep that in mind that you have to change it later before uploading this data. Or if you get used to work on that way, do it since the beginning, so later you have less job to do. But yeah, I agree.
Good question and a good comment. I think very complimentary to what we have shared. Thanks so much for that.
Marta, there's another, I'm not sure if it's a question in the Q&A. I will read it out loud again. Image standards are also important for ground truth, especially when using hyperspectral. RGB are trivial.
I think that's
actually RGB ground truth. It's not trivial. There are different formats such as the Microsoft COCO, as I said, and there are also the Pascal VOC format. Yeah, it depends on what type of information you want to extract out of deep learning. If it is with if it's only image classification, then you could use a simpler one. But if you really want to do the type of object detection, then you need to be careful with what format you are working with. But yeah, it's correct that with hyperspectral, it would be even more complicated.
Thanks so much, Manya. Patrice, is there anything you'd like to add to that question?
No, not to that one. Thanks.
Are there any other questions? Don't think so. If there are no other questions, of course, you have our email addresses, so you will be able to contact us at any time. Please do. But if that's okay, I also have some final questions, reflections to share with you through the Mentimeter. Would it be okay that I share my slides now?
Yeah, you have just a couple of minutes, but if it's enough,
I think
go ahead.
so. Okay, I'm now sharing my my final thing I wanted to show you. Just wait a second. Okay, hopefully you can see the Mentimeter question. My final question to you, which again, my screen seems to be not advancing. Oh yeah, sorry, now it advanced to again. How do you feel after today's webinar? That's an open question. And indeed, if you can in 1 minute, like first things that come to your mind, you know, did your feelings about data sharing or overall have changed since you have attended the webinar, and your reflections? Overwhelmed is also a fair answer. Any comments, you know, honest feedback, of course, we would appreciate. I will share data sets in the future. Yay, that's very nice. Very much appreciated. Wow, that's really beautiful message to share. Thank you. Any other reactions? If there are no other reactions, some more in front at least, thanks. Safe way to share and save data. Thank you so much. Thank you. The webinar has been so interesting. Oh, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Thank you for your kind words. I would like to then quickly share with you, I want to do it, but I'm not sure whether it would be useful for my data sets. We'll be more than happy, as I mentioned, we have this personalized support and community of colleagues from different fields. So if you have any particular questions of specific data sets, feel free to reach out to us via email. We are really there to help you to have this conversation with you. So if we can be of help, don't hesitate. Okay, the last slide is, are you more likely to publish your data after today? Yes, yes, yes. Oh, that's very nice to see. I don't know, that's also appreciated, honest answer, thank you. Thank you so much, really appreciate. I can see that, I don't know, I can understand that if you have any questions, of course, we will be happy to support you. I now stop sharing. I think, Isabel, you wanted probably to wrap up the session. Thank you so much, all of you.
Thank you, Marta. Thank you, Beatriz. Thank you, Mania. Thank you, Eri, for joining us today for this very instructive webinar on datasets, data sharing, and for TU research data. So we are moving to the next session. See you there. Bye. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.